Welcome everyone. First, thank you for everyone for attending this talk. My name is Nigel Armando, and I'm currently one of the managers of the data team here in First Circle. Right off the bat, I want to thank PH Startup Week for giving us the opportunity to share experiences in this platform. Our session is entitled "Harnessing the Power of Data." And our aim with the talk is to share with everyone the story on how the data team in First Circle deals with challenges that our company is currently facing along with our clients, especially using data as our main tool. Along with it, we want to share with you some samples of our projects, our best practices, and other experiences which we found useful in our process. Especially as we further evolved our team, we want to be able to serve our customers and, of course, harness the power of data as we go along in our process of serving the community. To begin, I'm very glad to have the privilege to introduce everyone from my team. This is the current data team, and they'll be joining us shortly. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, cool. I believe there's already 6 of us. Our VP of data will be joining us shortly. But yeah, so as a quick introduction for you guys to get to know us more. The data team at First Circle consists of 7 people. What you see here in the screen is our video chat app. It's what we use on an everyday basis, and we hang around here most of the time. Ever since the pandemic started. We hang around here to talk about our projects, clear some blockers, and other work-related things. It's actually our effort ever since we're not from the office. It's our effort to simulate the hallway conversations, which is admittedly a very scarce thing now in the work from home setup. So at least we have some way to do some knowledge diffusion and, of course, to talk about random banter every now and then. Other than that, though, I have a few facts to share about us. Well, first off, the data team started November 2018. First Circle started way before that, but the very first hire, which is TJ Palanca here in the picture, he's our VP of data now. And up to today, we've grown to about 7 people, and we're still growing. We're still looking to fill in different roles and, of course, further improve the impact in our company. Other fun facts are the minimum age, at least in our team, is 22. I wanted to share the maximum age also, but yeah, someone might get offended. So yeah, I'm just gonna share the minimum age. SQL query saved. Just a quick also fun fact. We've done over 9,000, and I've been watching it today. Actually, we reached just 9,000, literally just about 5 minutes ago from recording. Someone took the spot, and someone took the prize. The prize. But yeah, this is our team, and in essence, we're still growing, and we look to grow the team further in the future. Quick background though to guide our talk. I want to share what we do in First Circle. So again, we all work for First Circle, and to give some clarity on what First Circle does, we're a fintech company, and our goal and mission is really what you see here. We want to enable businesses to achieve their full potential using financing. To be exact, fast, fair, and flexible financial partnership. At the very core of our business are SMEs. They're our main clients, small to medium enterprises. And what we really want is to establish a partnership with these companies. Especially in this new economy, a common problem that SMEs face, these businesses face, is that it's very difficult to find working capital or even capital in the first place to support their businesses. SMEs, of course, they want to deliver goods to their respective buyers. An example here in the slide is commonly the government. And for them to deliver on the goods and services that they provide, they're going to need working capital. And most of the time, this is a difficult process, especially for SMEs who are yet to establish their credit worthiness, their credit scores. So in essence, another alternative that they can do is, of course, to go to First Circle. And our goal as First Circle is to establish that partnership and to finance them, to provide them with the necessary capital to superpower their business. So what I want to emphasize here, though, is that as First Circle, the key thing here is that we want to establish a partnership with these SMEs. We believe they're the backbone of the economy, and we want to be part of their growth and to support them as they influence our economy and to stimulate the economy. Just a fun fact also, The reason we call ourselves First Circle is because when we talk about financing, as in even in the most personal level, the first people we try to approach for loans, etc., is our family. And in essence, they're the first circle, quote unquote, of who we want to approach. Hence, where company name goes into. And of course, that translates to our goal of being the first thing that SMEs think about whenever they want to support their business. All right, so that's what we do as a company. But drilling down further as the data team. Um, as a data team here in First Circle, I'm going to go straight ahead and say that our main value to our company is really that we provide better decisions. We aim to provide better decisions. As straightforward as that. This can come in any form, whether operational or strategic. Since we are a tech company, aside from being a finance company, we have the capability to record anything that happens within our platform. So whenever someone takes a loan, whenever someone applies for a loan, we're able to measure and to collect data regarding these transactions. And because of that, we have a lot of data in place. We have a lot of data stored. Now, we want to use data to form insights and to support decisions in our day-to-day. Though really, as a data team, we don't want to stop in just collecting and having the data. Just to share, what you see here is an article released by The Economist last 2017. The point really is that data is now a valuable resource in modern times, just like oil was before. And I think it's not anymore a bold statement to say that data is going to be or is already the center of most businesses, especially in the near future or even in the further future. Our philosophy, though, in First Circle is that we don't want to end there. We don't want to end that data is just a valuable resource. I mean, taking the metaphor further, when we talk about oil in its raw form, it is not the one that powers our livelihood. You still have to process it. You still have to process it, make it into a material that's completely usable, something like petroleum. And that's the one that we find the most value in. Similarly, we believe data is also similar to oil. At its most raw form, it's just really an amalgamation of information. And it may or may not be useful to people at its very most raw format. So our job really as the data team here in First Circle is to make sure that we have the capabilities to extract and utilize the data. That's the first one. Second one is we want to form actionable insights from it beyond regular analytics. And third one, finally, we want to be able to scale the decisions and insights we make that we established because of the data processing. Now, for the rest of the talk, we're going to go deep into sharing our experiences in building the data team in First Circle. And we hope you get a thing or two from listening. As a general guide, what we hope to exactly impart here is how as a data team, how do we impart and generate value using data? To start with, I'm happy to introduce you to one of our data engineers who will be speaking next, Kemp Po, to tell us more about how we start in the process of extracting value from data. Kemp?
Thanks for that, Nigel. So really, the first question, as a data team, and any data team should be asking, is what data do we have, and where is it anyway? So just to show you a sneak peek, this is what our data looked like at the start. We had an abundance of data, but it was everywhere in their own silos. As you can see, we had the First Circle app, we had spreadsheets, CRMs, um, and these spreadsheets could be anywhere in just someone's personal Google Drive. So all we really had was raw unstructured data. Building up on Nigel's metaphor, sure, we had crude oil from the app, maybe some from the spreadsheets, but we haven't refined it yet. And at its crude state, it didn't make sense. It wasn't useful at all to us. You can't just pump crude oil into your car or the plane. It just doesn't work that way. So in this form, the data wasn't easy to retrieve, nor was it easy to understand for people. Even within the app itself, there were so many columns that weren't straightforward as they seemed to be. It also kept some business logic hidden in itself. Sometimes between the app and the CRM, we'd have different definitions of who was qualified or who wasn't qualified to take out a loan with us. The CRM had tons of data on who our customers were. Telephony services had data on how we were interacting with them. And the app itself had the transactions that we were dealing with the customers. So we really needed a solution that put all these sources together and combined them in ways that helps us understand the entire business. So our solution to the problem was initially really just the schema or this table within the app itself that was somewhat processed. It solved it solved issues within the app and consolidated our understanding of the entire process that a customer would face from onboarding, submissions, loan origination, and repayment servicing. However, it did not solve the main issue that we were trying to fix, which was the fact that we had a lot of data silos in the company. So what this really prompted was the creation of a data warehouse, which was built on SQL. Think of this as a giant database that pulled from all the sources we had. It didn't contain the constraints of a Google Sheet, but was just as flexible, if not even more flexible. The data warehouse enabled us to combine the understanding of the customer from the CRM to that of the app. The real beauty of our data warehouse was that at any time, if we needed to pull in a new source, for example, if we had this new Google Sheet, or if we had a new CRM, we could just throw in that source to the data warehouse, and that data could be readily available to anyone with the business. Um, oops. The real beauty of it was that at any time, if we needed to pull in a new data source, for example, a new Google Sheet or a new CRM that we had, we could just add in that source and that data could become readily available to anyone in the business. And that data already had the proper corrections applied to it. Another efficiency that it brought was that any business logic we could have could easily be applied at the warehouse level. Examples of these are maybe which customer we see as high value or which customer do we see as active or inactive. So really we were able to keep our data consistent throughout the business. Another huge infrastructure project that we had is that one that we aim to leverage even more in the years to come. Along the way, we realized that our data was really rich with relationships. We have data that shows how different businesses in the country interact with each other, asking questions like who they interact with, how they interact with them, and when they interact with each other. We realized that the normal tabular database wasn't enough to show these types of relationships, and they weren't going to give us the same type of information that we could gain, such as understanding that our customer, who we loan out to, could potentially be both a client and a buyer to other customers, because all we were really looking at were just tables, not much that different from what you would see in a spreadsheet. So we really couldn't hold this type of information efficiently with a tabular database, nor could we visualize it easily. As such, we decided to create a new piece of infrastructure that allowed us to unlock these capabilities. In fact, this was one of my first projects coming into the company. It was the graph database. We took months learning about it, scoping it internally within the team, understanding how to build it and what exactly we needed to build. But the biggest thing we forgot while building the graph database was that we needed to bring stakeholders into the conversation, aligning with them what we could do with the piece of infrastructure we were trying to build. Before I even began writing that first line of code, I should have understood the potential impact of what the project had and justify it with our stakeholders. So there are really three things that I want to highlight with the data warehouse and any infrastructure that we build, in fact. Um, the first is that I want to highlight that correct foundations are necessary. Just like in a building, you have to pour in the foundation well. There are no shortcuts, or else your entire infrastructure is compromised. Just like in data, when our foundations aren't sound and created well, it'll really come back to haunt us later. So take the time to think and build up these foundations. The worst possible scenario for a data team is that business doesn't trust the data anymore because we made mistakes that we could have avoided at the foundational level. Secondly, as a person coming from technical role, the business should always understand why we're building infrastructure and what capabilities we want to bring forward with that piece of infrastructure. So we built the graph database. Initially, the business didn't understand what it was, and much more, they didn't understand what it could unlock for the business. And to resolve this, what we started were bringing in brown bag sessions and more requests for comment sessions. So these were to effectively communicate to the business what we wanted to do and why we wanted to do it. So really effective communication is extremely important, and I cannot stress it enough, especially for infrastructures where sometimes business value isn't always immediately recognizable. And lastly, the biggest thing that I think we all must remember is that business needs change out throughout time, especially as a business or as a startup, rather. Is always changing. The business today may not be the same as the business tomorrow. Like what we saw during the start of the pandemic, there was a massive shift to digital platforms. Foundations need to be able to keep up with the business, or even better, think steps ahead of the business by keeping it flexible and scalable. The business at the start could be serving hundreds of customers, but in a few months, serving tens of thousands of people. So the systems that we set up must be able to cope up with that change immediately, or else you have the possibility of losing stakeholder trust, and most importantly, losing customers. So really, through the data warehouse and all the infrastructure pieces we've built out, now we have a single understanding of who our customers are, how we've been interacting with them, and most importantly, how their businesses are doing in our eyes. With the foundations in place, we can move into what the data strategists of the team, Lino and Miel, have to say about leading the charge with driving business directly with the insights that we could bring with the data we've collected throughout time.
Thanks, Cam. Okay, so today I'll be talking a little about how we generate actionable insights, specifically through strategic analytics and frameworks. I guess I can just start off by kind of comparing the environments that startups and more established companies operate in. So I would probably say that startups tend to operate in more rapidly changing and more volatile environments. And given the fast pace of these environments, our targets tend to change more often. And I've experienced that sometimes this can result in metrics getting lost in translation. In more well-established companies, they probably have found core metrics that have been tried and tested through time and that work for them. But in startups, this is not always the case. And so this can sometimes result in people trying to approach the same problems in different ways. And yeah, given the volatile environment that we're in, the importance of iteration is really highlighted. And we always try to adapt quickly, but sometimes in our effort to move fast, we may make changes or decisions with unintended consequences. And something important to keep in mind is that fast decision-making can never trump smart and informed decision-making. So that's something that will always be really important. And lastly, something that holds for all organizations. Our organizations tend to operate in silos. What that means is that maybe knowledge tends to be concentrated in a certain group, with specific subject matter experts. And when that's the case, that really limits the solution space, and it can result in misaligning goals, misaligned decisions, and that would not be ideal. So really, that's where a data strategist would step in. Our role is to kind of mitigate these problems and create value out of it. So I guess we can ask the question, how do we keep making good decisions? In First Circle, we've had a bunch of projects. We faced these challenges, and we've had a bunch of projects to try and address these things that we faced. So the first one I'd like to discuss is the performance management system. This was actually the first project I had upon entering the company. And when I took on the project, we already had top line metrics in place, and they were good metrics. But what I had to improve on was to try to improve how we track these metrics and to make sure that these metrics were clearly communicated across the company to people in different functions in a digestible manner. So, in essence, we wanted to answer the question, how are we performing now versus where we want to be? And if we're not performing at our desired trajectory, how can we adjust to get to where we want to be? And so our solution to this was to create one source of truth for both strategic and operational indicators. And this is something that can be referred to company-wide. It's something that is digestible, that is understandable by someone who may not be as familiar with data as maybe a data team member. And the desired outcome out of all of this is really that we're able to have outcome ownership and company-wide alignment. And yeah, the second project is the healthy usage framework. One thing that we want to ensure is that our borrower-lender relationship with our customers is mutually beneficial. And one way that we can make sure of this is by encouraging our customers to use our product in an economically sustainable manner. And anecdotally, we've been able to see patterns of customers who are likely to default. And obviously, when you default, you have unhealthy usage. However, prior to this framework, we weren't able to view it in a systematic way. And by creating this framework, we were able to systematize how we view customer usage, healthy versus unhealthy. And through this, we're able to be more involved in maximizing the growth of our potential customers. And we can do what we can to guide our customers towards healthy usage. And we kind of lead them towards our goal of satisfying fast, fair, and flexible financing for SMEs across the Philippines. And lastly, verification policy simulation. This can be anchored onto what I said earlier about all the rapid changes that happen in our environment. Before making any decisions, especially with policy changes, we have to first understand the impact of this policy change, not only in the company, but for our customers. And we need to weigh out the potential outcomes, the pros and the cons. Obviously, we want to maximize the benefits and minimize the costs for both us and for the customers as well. So in order to do that, we have a simulation before we make any sort of policy change. And we do that by translating our new policy, the new desired policy, into codified logic. And we run this logic against historical data. And we see the new results based on how we check out how the results would have differed had we had that new logic in place before. So when we do this, we make sure to get our stakeholders involved. As Kemp mentioned earlier, it's really important to work with different stakeholders across the company. And we try to get their insights so that we can iterate on whatever's necessary before we roll out any changes. So essentially, what's important here is that we really weigh out our actions and its effects to make sure that we're able to get as close as possible to our desired result as a company. And these are just some of the projects that we've worked on, but we've really garnered a lot of takeaways from everything. So to discuss more about what we've learned, Lino Lequanan will be speaking now.
Yeah, hi. So thanks for that, Niel. As she said, these are just a couple of projects we've led. And the reason we think they've been super effective for us is, number one, we actually meet decisions where they are. So yeah, decisions can come from every level of the organization, from anyone. And there will always be room for data on that table. So yeah, at the end of the day, a solution co-developed will always be just more impactful than one we made in isolation. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the second reason here is that we aim for value, which doesn't always mean sophistication. So for all of the projects we've laid out here, the implementations aren't as complicated or as hard to follow as you think. So the underlying principle here is, if a simple solution can do the same job but with similar results, the bias is to always just go simple instead of go complicated. So just to give a very clear example, policy simulations like the one we mentioned, they've always just boiled down to very good programming fundamentals, good wrangling and good recursion, rather than the more complicated methods that you'd expect, like let's say Monte Carlo. Next slide, please. Yeah, the last reason here is that data is a common language that is best spoken. So something we feel a lot of people, a lot of organizations take for granted is putting in the actual effort to share your learnings, share your insights, and share your thoughts. So more often than not, you will be surprised at how many people actually find your insights useful. So just to give a very clear example, something like the healthy usage framework was initially an ask from Risk, but during development, we realized just how powerful sharing this information company-wide was. So yeah, we decided to do just a very simple brown bag session. And something as simple as that sparked a lot of very interesting conversations with sales, for example, not necessarily from Risk, but people who got a lot of information, a lot of insight from this talk. So at the end of the day, getting buy-in for all of these data solutions from everyone involved will just make it so much easier to automate these decisions away when the need arises. So yeah, to speak more on that, to speak more on scaling these decisions, we have Vince and Evan.
Right, thank you for that, Lino. So, hi, I'm Vince. I'm the data product associate for the data team. And as someone who works in data, I'm always very curious and I'm always very excited to build things. I've built my fair share of dashboards, analytical studies, models, and awesome looking data tools. And some of these data tools were used and some of these data tools were also not used. And I'm sure any data person has experienced the frustration of building something for the business, thinking it's super cool, and only to realize that this thing wasn't used a few months down. So the idea is, as a data team, we want to make sure that the things we build are useful, and we want to make sure that these insights and all the models that we build eventually get enacted in the day-to-day operations and decisions of the company. So how do we do this? So one of the things I really like about First Circle's approach to data is that we're big on building data products. So just like any typical tech company or startup usually has a product team or a product management team that thinks of how the things that are being built will bring value to the customer. Um, we think of it the same way in the data team. We like to make sure that anything we work on brings value to the stakeholders and the decision makers that will be using the data. So data products will often fall into two categories. So those that support decisions by giving people more information to make smarter, more informed decisions. So these are the dashboards, analytical studies, frameworks that Lino and Miel touched on in the previous section. So these decisions are more strategic and human-driven in the sense that you give people the information they need, and these people will be making the decision. On the other hand, we have automated decisions. So these are things that speed up your decisions. So why automate your decisions? Because as companies grow, the number of decisions that you have to make every day will also grow. And to be able to handle that scale and to be able to have that consistency when you make decisions, you need to be able to make decisions faster. So I want to emphasize that none of these data products are better than the other. So like machine learning models are just as cool as dashboards and vice versa. So like you want to make sure that the data products you're building are the data products that are fit for the situation. And very often data products at First Circle have been a hybrid between the two. So we have like algorithm driven components that we also feed to stakeholders, and they're the ones who decide. So what are a few examples of these? So the first is the exceptions management system. So with the exceptions management system, what was the problem we were facing? So as First Circle grew, the number of clients that we had to take in also grew. And these clients are usually handled by our salespeople, so our account managers, business development managers, relationship managers. And these are the people who every day talk to different partners. And if your business grows, the number of partners that one relationship manager has to handle will also grow. So it becomes very hard to prioritize which one. And at First Circle, we're very big on making sure that we deliver fast service, that every client gets a reasonable amount of speed when we process them. So we created this system that actually streams the data live and frames it for our account managers in such a way that um, they'll be able to see the data on like all the clients that are currently being serviced, and it will show them like how to prioritize based on the different targets we have. So this was very helpful because it actually gave us a lot of insight into like how we could do our operations better. And second is something that's super cool, is our limits engine. So when you're doing when you're giving out financing to different businesses, one of the big decisions you have to make is how much money you want to lend them. So this is what our limits engine wanted to solve. So we took in different customer data points, like based on like what they filled out during the onboarding. We also collaborated with our credit risk team. We tried to understand like how they form their policies to like how to reasonably give out a good amount to different clients, something that would help them, but also control for risk and the overall portfolio of the company. And we built our limits engine. So what the limits engine automates is the decision of how much to give customers. So this was very helpful because as our client base grew, we were able to apply a very consistent logic to underwriting that um, that we could use to live up to our brand promise of providing fair financing to different clients. So that is our limits engine, and it's one of the most used data products currently, and it's one of the most influential things towards the business right now. Third is something that's a hybrid between decision support and automated decisions. So what we try to do in the company is we also try to bring the data very close to everyone who's working. So one of the things we do is we actually get a snapshot of our different top line performance metrics, and we send a pulse to our company Slack group, and everyone can see how First Circle is doing in terms of all the metrics we care about every day. And this usually helps people. One, it helps motivate them by helping them see how we're growing. And it also helps us learn and see how we can improve in certain areas. So these are all of our data products. And I want to introduce Evan, our data analyst, to talk more about the thought process that comes behind developing these.
So thanks, Vince. The key learning that we'd like to emphasize, that we've learned as we built our data products, is the presence of proper feedback loops. So I'm sure many of us as data professionals have experienced feature creeping or getting feedback that results to large changes in the middle of development. So this can be sometimes frustrating and also pretty disruptive. But as data professionals, we also realize that these feedback and comments are important. In fact, this shows that our users and stakeholders are engaged with the product. So this isn't really a problem of whether to accept feedback or not. Rather, we need to establish good feedback loops and create a system that takes these into account. And we do this by working with the people closest to the decisions we're making and by reinforcing systems. So this leads us to our second key learning. So next slide, please, Nigel. When designing products, user-centered development leads to a much smoother workflow. Stakeholders and internal users should be involved from a product's conception, implementation, all the way to its iterative improvements, much like what Lino said regarding how we construct our frameworks. So we, as a data team, essentially have to be close to the business. So our stakeholders and internal users build the logic and components of the product together with us. With their domain expertise and our data expertise, our products perform the way they are intended to. And this essentially creates an environment that reinforces the learnings that we make and gives us the agility to apply these learnings pretty quickly. So one example of this is a project we recently had with credit checks. At the onset, we defined what the problem is with key stakeholders and the operational teams closest to the problem. With this, we can properly scope out the problem and align on the next steps forward. So while developing, we constantly give feedback and updates on the project and improve upon it by incorporating the expertise found across the data and the internal users. And once we've come up with what we think is the best outcome or what the best solution is, we productize it and make sure that it is performing as expected. So, because of our development process, our products are transparent by nature to our stakeholders and to our users. Essentially, if any decision wasn't the right decision, we have the ability to adjust quickly and realign on what the next best thing is to do. So, developing with this system and these principles enables First Circle to build strong data products that deliver value to the company through faster and better decision making across all operational teams. So, with that, to talk about what the best way we thought we could build our data team is our VP for Data, TJ Palanca.
So thank you, Evan. To round out the discussion, I'd just like to take some time to introduce to everyone a few meta practices that have helped us as we built the data team from a data team of one to kind of what we have now. Next slide. So we have 5 general themes that we'd like to introduce to people. So centering around decisions, building data products up incrementally, concerning ourselves with the problems of our users, democratizing data, and diversifying the team. Before I'd like to get into each one of these, though, I'd like to highlight a simple fact that most data teams don't really come built into companies. I'll explain what I mean by that in a bit. So in any company, there will be a team in charge of sales or distribution. You would call that usually marketing, growth, sales, operations, et cetera, et cetera. There will also be a team in charge of kind of either purchasing or developing the product. So it may be purchasing, product development, or engineering. Lastly, there will be teams dedicated to general administration, which may be called finance, leadership, human resources. By the time companies start to consider kind of having a data team, they will ideally have achieved some non-trivial amount of scale. This is usually when a company has achieved product market fit and they're looking to either, number one, take advantage of the data they already have accumulated or use that data to make better decisions. That doesn't mean that data teams aren't really that useful. It's just that data teams usually come later. And what that means is people who find themselves being data person number one will encounter the issue of needing to provide value. One of the things that we have found very useful to facilitate these discussions about where a data team should provide value is really by making decisions the ultimate product of your data team. Next slide. So what really helped us is that we centered around decisions as the main product and not models, analysis, tools, or systems. While these things are important, analysis, models, tools, or systems, and this is actually how we achieve our goals, it's important to keep in mind that the end product is to allow the business to make good, fast, and more decisions. The job doesn't really end when the analysis is shipped or the model is shipped or the tool is shipped. It really ends when the decision is actually made. Within this exercise, we recommend performing a catalog really of all the decisions that your company makes in kind of your core transaction flow. For First Circle, for example, what we did was we cataloged all of the decisions that led to an SME customer receiving finance. So essentially, we asked ourselves, what are the decisions that First Circle needs to make in order to provide a customer with finance? Afterwards, it's really good to kind of split that into 2 kinds of decisions. The first kind are what I call bespoke, luxury, or what you would call at the top of this graphic as strategic decisions. These are decisions that are not made frequently, but they have a disproportionately high impact. So an example is a product launch or a market launch or modeling macro risk, right? Maybe modeling the effect of a pandemic. These are decisions that you don't really make every day, but are important to get right because they are so impactful. The second kind are what I call mass-produced, repeatable decisions, and these I name these operational decisions. These may be individually low impact, but they are made so often, so they're repeatedly made throughout the day, that their combination is high impact. For example, setting an individual SME customer's credit limit might be on its own like a very low impact decision. But if you do it, because it's done multiple times in a day and it's done for all of our customers repeatedly, in aggregate, they are very significant. So one thing that's important to keep of note is that the type of methods that you want to be using to address strategic versus operational decisions are likely going to be very different. So for strategic decisions, you really need interpretable, low data volume, very principled, domain-informed methods. So these are traditional econometric methods, Bayesian statistics, or what people usually call causal inference. Operational decisions, on the other hand, need more machine learning or AI techniques, really to realize not just decision-making benefits by the company making the right decisions, but also automation benefits, because really you're saving time by people not having to do this day in and day out. So the next point we'd like to introduce, best practice we'd like to introduce is, next slide, to build data products up incrementally. So really what we want to be doing is to ensure that we're making progress across each of these decision areas. And how you make progress without kind of overextending yourself is by building data products in a consistent and incremental way. So at first, usually when you come into a company and either it's a startup or a new department or something like that, most decisions are made intuitively. So human makes a judgment that directly translates into business decisions. That's at the bottom of this graphic here. Eventually, it evolves to some sort of a data-driven or data-informed kind of decision-making process where really you're using the data you have, you're summarizing it. Eventually, you're still presenting it to a human decision maker who then makes the final decision, but at least it's already guided by data. Above that, that's where kind of most people kind of think of when they say kind of automation or AI informed decisions, which is the machine is actually presenting a list of options that the human can choose from, or it may go directly to decision making where the human doesn't have to be involved. At first circle, because a lot of the decisions that we make impact real businesses, impact real people, we find it very important to actually have human judgment at the end of the process, not to serve as the actual final decision maker, but as exceptions management, because finance is it's very hard to get it right. And therefore, really at the end of the day, if our models aren't able to provide the right decisions, we want to make sure that a human is there to step in and really move up. So within that AI-driven bracket, we have some progression, right? Like usually it'll start rules-based. It's automated, but it's rules-based and it's really fact-based inputs. After that, you want to be replacing the fact-based inputs with some sort of modeling estimate, maybe like a credit score or something like that. Afterwards, only then can you move to interpretable statistical models, and then the holy grail, which is kind of AI and actual machine learning. And we find that going through this kind of upgrade process in a principled way has really two benefits. Number one, it de-risks your project. Even if we know we can build a really good predictive model, we know this is exactly solvable by our methods. You really don't know until we actually try it, and that's a characteristic that can be found in really any data project where a lot of the results are really dependent on the data that we have, and we don't know what that is until we actually do the thing. So by de-risking your project, really limiting your downside, you're not locking in resources for a long time for something that has an uncertain payoff. The second is if you're working at all in a situation where you have domain experts. So in the world of finance is a very, very old industry. And obviously there are many experts in it. It slowly introduces kind of your domain experts that you work with to the concepts. and allows them to build trust in both your models and kind of your ability to really advance decision making in this area. And by moving in this process, you're really going slow to go fast. Like you're being principled, it's so that there are no blockers that come up in the way. And we find that this is a really useful way to explain how we build data products at First Circle. Next. So then the next is to really concern ourselves with the problems of our users. And I think this goes for any kind of builder role where you're building a system where other people will use, whether internally or externally. A lot of the times, either data teams will produce products for internal users, to use for decision making, business intelligence, and a lot of the times also you will produce something that directly feeds the customer. And whether it's internal or external, it's really important that we have the problems of the user in mind. Otherwise, we can end up with really, I would say, misfit solutions and really make assumptions that we shouldn't be making. It's important that we iterate, we close feedback loops. What that means is, again, harkening back to a point I made earlier, the analysis isn't really done until a decision is made. And we can help our stakeholders make better decisions, really by focusing on what problems they actually want to solve. It may be that we see problems as a data team that other stakeholders are not able to see, but it's important that we kind of involve them in the process and really tell them it's a problem before going ahead and solving it. Because it's only with the internal use of your product or the deployment of a product that it actually has impact. That said, cross-team collaboration is super important. And one thing that we found to be super useful for data teams is if they really take the time to understand the operational process that they're studying. We find that builds a lot of credibility. And it really makes the data person not this ivory tower person that's recommending something that doesn't make sense, but actually just a teammate that is powered by data or like can code and can solve unique problems that the other team members cannot solve. Okay, so the next the fourth practice that has worked for us very well is to really democratize our data. Typically, if you come in, a lot of people will have privileged access to the data, but a lot of the other people don't have access to data, or they have to go through some cumbersome request process. What we've done in First Circle is to really ensure that every employee in the company that needs to use data doesn't have to go through a cumbersome request process, doesn't have to be friends with the data team in order to actually get the data they need to do their jobs better. So just to explain the chart that we have here, this is the number of queries run on our Metabase, which is a business intelligence tool, since we started. And that inflection point that you see here is when we released the data warehouse and opened up permissions to everyone in the company. And what you've seen is that the non-data team queries has really exploded. And it is quite impactful to actually have people solving their own problems using data, because that introduces them to the concept. And if ever they want to go through more advanced techniques or use more advanced techniques, then they're much more open to the idea. Other than that, of course, it's really good for the company, because it cannot be expected that every single piece of analysis has to come from the data team. Really, the best people who the people who come up with the best analysis sometimes are the people who are actually in the trenches working the problems that they want to solve. And yeah, I think it's hard to underestimate this. It's more of an organizational cultural thing, but we really find that opening up the data, really empowering users through SQL trainings, and providing them with the right resources to use the data right. That really allows people to solve their own problems using data. Next slide. The last is to diversify your team, and I'm not speaking in terms of just like define axes of diversity, but really, what the point I want to make here is don't look for usual suspects when you're looking for data scientists or data analysts or data strategists. The usual suspects are, people who have computer science degrees or engineering degrees. Really, what we want, data science is a really new field, and what we want is people who actually want to solve problems and have the aptitude and the technical skills to solve those using using the tools of data science. The team what we built here is a bit more varied in terms of like background. Like we have people from economics, from management, from computer science, from accountancy, industrial engineering, management engineering. And what we found is that the diversity of experience reduces the number of blind spots that the team has, and really gets to that unicorn data scientist, or that data scientist that knows everything. We're able to do that with a diverse team instead of really constantly searching for that unicorn data scientist. And one last point I'd like to make here is by hiring really diverse backgrounds in your data team, you're able to really connect to the business in a way that teams that are a bit more homogenous are not able to do. Because the other teams in the business are also going to be quite diverse, and it helps to really have that common background to lean on when you're having discussions about your data products, your analyses, or your models. All right. Yeah. So to close out this discussion, I'd just like to introduce a few resources that really contain a lot of the thinking we have presented during this talk. First Circle's data team maintains a blog on Medium, medium.com/data-first-circle. It contains a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, as well as some of the kind of more technical bits, as well as some internship narratives that our previous interns have experienced. So I do encourage everyone to take a look at these. If anyone has any questions at all or would like to chat after this, our emails are here as well. You can contact us at these emails. And we'd really appreciate your engagement as well. It's fun to talk about this, building data teams. And the last is, of course, we do maintain a blog at our First Circle does maintain a blog at our site. And our site is at firstcircle.ph. And of course, if you if at all you are an SME customer and you'd like to secure financing for your business, that is also the place to go. All right, so that should be the end of our talk. Thank you very much. On behalf of the data team, myself, Nigel, Miel, Kemp, Lino, Evan, Vince, I'd like to thank you for your time, and we look forward to your questions.